That is not the end to politics around this visit. Now, Congress has also reacted as the Prime Minister is all set to visit iconic mosque in Cairo. Congress leader Rahman Khan says he never visits mosques in India.
I welcome the Prime Minister having gone to a mosque in Cairo. If he has visited some of the mosques in India, then it would have been right to claim that Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. He has not visited any mosque in 9 years, but he is visiting a mosque outside the country.
Right, so domestic politics is also going on simultaneously as Prime Minister indulges in bilateral talks with the leaders in Egypt. Joining me on this broadcast to understand the significance of this visit is Dalia Ziada, who's the director of MEEM, a Center for Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean Studies. Dinkar P. Srivastava, former ambassador who's also served in the country, is with us. Maroof Raza, Group Consulting Editor, Times Network. Welcome to the broadcast. Sirs, my first question to you, Mr. Dinkar Srivastava, as somebody who has been in Egypt, has worked in Egypt, how are Egyptians looking at this visit from India? What do they have to gain out of this?
The Egyptians are very warm-hearted people, and we have civilizational links. In the contemporary period, India's importance has gone up both in the immediate region as well as extended neighborhood. President Al-Sisi was the guest of honor on the Republic Day function. So the Egyptian people are aware of the importance of the visit and the fact that India has worked out its equations with all sides. You know, we have good relations with Russia. We have excellent relations with USA. The fact that Prime Minister is visiting Egypt on his way back to US itself is a reflection of that. So I think the Egyptian people and the Egyptian government are looking at it, at the Prime Minister's visit, with a lot of warmth and expectation.
What has also put this in the spotlight is the one question that was raised by the Wall Street Journal reporter in the US about what the Prime Minister of India is doing about Muslims and minority rights in the country, as well as freedom of speech. In the view of that, when a Grand Mufti of a country that has 90% of Muslims as its population says that, Modi is promoting inclusivity and pluralism, Maroof Raza, do you think that is going to have resonance not just in India but globally as well?
See, the Grand Mufti in Cairo is an extremely important geopolitical figure, not just in Egypt, but across the board as far as the Arab world is concerned. His verdict on a number of issues which are Islamic or geostrategic carry a lot of weightage. Now, for example, the Grand Mufti is the head of the Al-Azhar Mosque, which is historically a very, very important place of Islamic thought and learning. The Grand Mufti is also earlier made statements to say that India's secular credentials to be lauded at. Now, yes, I said so yesterday on the channel also, that there are aberrations, and I am not condoning those aberrations. I am not writing off everything that is being reported, which may show Mr. Modi or his government in wrong light. But overall, India still presents hope. India still presents opportunities. And, for all their faults, the BJP-led government is making a huge amount of investments in Madrassa-related education, their modernization, their IT culture, and engaging them in public life. There are vast parts of India where the hand of the law is being challenged by right-wing elements, and that's a sad thing. And this is something which Mr. Modi must have brought back after the interjections in the United States, that, you know, it's an area that he would need to look into if India, US, India, Egypt, India and the Arab world. Please remember, India has got very strong ties with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But there are two quick points I want to make. You see, Egypt and India are historically been good friends. The relationship went into a slump for the last 26 years. Mr. Modi is reviving that. Egypt is also looking at many defense and strategic partnerships with India, which will be a big opening for India and a big block for China and its agenda in North Africa.
Okay. Mrs. Yes, please come.
Egypt sees India as a center of academic excellence, which can help Egypt set up an IIT, set up schools of learning. So there is a lot of meeting ground, and we have to start somewhere. And President Al-Sisi, having come to Republic Day as chief guest, was a very big signal to the Arab world, of which Egypt is a part, that India would like to move speedily forward beyond the Gulf region into countries like Egypt and various other North African countries.
Right.
And I think that's the message.
Okay, Mrs. Ziada, bringing you in on this, people are saying that this could be a game changer when it comes to the two countries, with India representing the voice of global South and Egypt also looking to diversify its alliances beyond the Western Bloc. What is your perception?
So first of all, thank you for having me. I believe that history is repeating itself in the scenes that we are seeing today. In the 1960s, Egypt and India came together to form the non-alignment movement, which actually enabled the global South to deal with the consequences of the confrontations that were happening between the Western and Eastern superpowers during the Cold War era, and what happened after, and even the world wars before that. And due to this, they were able, and due to their regional, important regional roles in their immediate geographies, they were able to do a lot of good on economic and political levels for their surrounding regions. We are seeing this happening today through a renewed sense of solidarity
Yes.
in Egypt and India in face of the ongoing.
Ma'am, just a second, I'll have to interject you there because we're getting live visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who is visiting 11th century mosque in Egypt. This is the Al-Hakim Mosque, and this visit is extremely significant because Dawoodi Bohra is a significant community even back home, and they are the ones who have been involved in restoration along with the government of the country of this mosque that is said to be thousands of years old. Right now, you see the Prime Minister there at the mosque, visiting the Imam Al-Hakim bi Amr Allah Mosque. This is one of the several engagements that are lined up to strengthen the bilateral ties between the two countries. A lot of optics also involved in this for a domestic audience back home in India, because Dawoodi Bohra community has been a significant vote base for the BJP, especially in Gujarat. And this mosque is an important cultural site for Dawoodi Bohra community in Cairo. You can see the visuals there of the Prime Minister at the mosque. Yes, Ziada, please finish your point. Sorry, I had to interject you there.
No, actually, I will take from your point here. Of course, I understand the criticism against Prime Minister Modi for his fight against extremists, and some people try to portray this as a fight against all Muslims, which is not true. And I think his visit or his interest in or putting on his list of priorities the visit to Dar al-Ifta today is a significant message to Muslims worldwide, not only to Egyptian Muslims, because Dar al-Ifta represent all the Sunni Muslims worldwide. So I think it's an important message that says that we are fighting against extremists and not against Muslims, which is a fight that Egypt also has gone through during the past 7 or 8 years. And even as a Muslim majority country, the state was criticized for doing this, although this was not the truth. So this is also one of the areas where I think the two states can perfectly cooperate with each other. On another level, we have also seen, actually people here are very excited with the cooperation with India for many reasons. One of them is, of course, the economic issue. India is a very powerful country when it comes to economy and economic power. Indian investments are on the rise in Egypt. The trade volume between India and Egypt spiked to $7 billion in the past year from 3.5 in the previous years. Yeah, almost doubled. So this is, and also there is a promise with increased investments by Indian businessmen and the Indian government in projects in Egypt. And Egypt has promised India to dedicate a special hub in the Suez Canal Industrial Zone alongside other dedicated hubs for Russia and China. And this is also very significant for the cooperation between the two countries. It will definitely participate in enhancing the trade flow of Indian goods to the world, not only to Africa, but also to Europe and to the Middle East through Egypt. And at the same time will also enable Egypt to enhance its economy away from its Western allies that are now very busy with their own conflicts with Russia. So also on the military side, we have seen rising trend of military cooperation between Egypt and India, which will also benefit both countries a lot. The latest of which was a military exercise just last month in May between Indian and Egyptian troops in an Egyptian airbase. This is also very significant, and I think it will even improve in the next years.
Mr. Srivastava, do you think that India's affiliation towards Egypt will also be higher, because there is only a limit, there's a certain limit to what we can get out of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and which is why Egypt would be a very useful ally?
We should not see this relationship as either or. You are right that our relations with Egypt will get us a lot of mileage. Let's remember that Egypt is the largest Arab country in the world in terms of population, far bigger than any of the Gulf countries. It has the largest military in the region, and it has an ancient civilization. So all three, and then of course the geostrategic location. It straddles the Suez Canal, which remains one of the major transit routes for the international trade, and certainly for Indian trade with the West. And it is a member of the African Union as well as the Arab, as well as the Middle East. It's the founder member of the Arab League. So for all these reasons, Egypt has an abiding importance in international relations, and with India, we have special, cultural relations. I started my first posting in Indian Foreign Service in Cairo, and I still remember warmth of the Egyptian people on the streets. Indian cine stars like Raj Kapoor and Amitabh Bachchan were very popular. And incidentally, talking of the cultural links, the Arabic language, the word for maths is handasa, and handasa comes from Hind. So algebra went to Egypt from India, and from there it spread all over the world. So I think these ancient links will be strengthened by Prime Minister's visit, which underlines the contemporary importance of Egypt as well as India, and the parallel in their trajectories.
Maroof Raza, somehow, irrespective of who India is talking to, the cloud of China always is lurking over the talks. Do you think that increasing influence of China in Egypt would also be something that we would like to address in this visit?
That would be a factor that would be kept in mind, but that is not going to be the most driving important factor for India's relations with Egypt. Please understand that India's relations in the Arab world, of which Egypt is a part, but not the Gulf countries, is individually, bilaterally based on the strengths of every country's assets and what it brings to bear in the relationship with India and what India puts back in there. The second aspect to understand is that Egypt was at one stage the pioneer of the non-aligned movement with Pandit Nehru, which was a reason why Egypt stood out in the Arab world as a leader. Things have changed, the world has moved on. The non-aligned in itself is a relatively dead horse. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's a very wise move on the part of the government of India to look at building its relations with Egypt, because the fact is that Egypt is now looking at buying top-end defense technology that India manufactures, and India wants to improve its defense exports, the LCA fighter aircraft, the radar systems, the airfield defense systems, the Akash missiles, and various other things. The second thing that India brings to bear for Egypt is its historical links and the fact that Egypt and India could be game changers as far as the fight against terrorism worldwide goes. Very few people know that Egypt has always stood up with India and shunned away Pakistan's effort to show India in bad light in the Organization of Islamic Countries. And now both countries have a counter-terrorism initiative, and therefore for people like the Al-Qaeda and other groups, the Al-Qaeda was founded in Egypt, by the way, and the Al-Qaeda's original intellectual inspiration comes from the writings of some of their original writers in Egypt. I personally have a connect with Egypt. I was born at a time when my father was serving as India's member of India's first peacekeeping force in Gaza, Egypt, and India has historically been a country that has enjoyed a neutral status and a lot of goodwill there. So I think Mr. Modi is doing all the right things. There was a point that was made by somebody in the opposition before you went into our distinguished guest, that why does Mr. Modi not visit mosques in India? Valid point, but as I've understood, I believe a visit by Mr. Modi is due to Ajmer Sharif in the next few months. So there is what he is doing. He has a lot on his plate. Everyone expects him to address their agenda 100%, but at his level, he has to address issues which are relevant to India and its future standing. Overall, I think it's a great initiative to revive ties where in a country like Egypt, India has made no formal prime ministerial visit for the last 26 years. And therefore, and he's also going to visit a war memorial to Indian soldiers near the port of Suez, where 3,799 Indian soldiers died in World War I. Dafadar from Deccan Horse won the Victoria Cross. And that memorial now is a good symbol of the fact that Indian soldiers put their life on line for Egypt. And in World War II, India's regiments and India's divisions carry a remarkable reputation for holding the line for British troops as the Germans were trying to take over Egypt. So India has paid in blood, in emotion, and in money for Egypt historically. People in Egypt know that. I think people in India need to know that.
Ms. Ziada, do you think that this could be mutually beneficial? Because both these countries, as Maroof pointed out, Egypt at one point used to be a very prominent voice but has lost that platform now. Could both India and Egypt bolster each other's position on international fronts?
Yes, of course. Actually, speaking about China in your previous question, Egypt's relationship with regional and international powers usually comes with strings attached. In other words, these countries always dictate certain behaviors that Egypt should follow, so this relationship should continue. But with India, the issue is different. India is a powerful country economically and politically. It is very well connected among different international organizations and international groups like the BRICS, the G20, which will enable Egypt later on, which is actually happening. India is already empowering Egypt to have access into these organizations and into these alignments and groupings to empower Egypt economically and politically. So at the same time, it's happening while India is not dictating anything on Egypt other than cooperation, sincere cooperation between the two countries. And we are so lucky that the will of the two presidents, or the vision, let's say, of the Prime Minister Modi and the President Al-Sisi, the two leaders have a common vision regarding how they should lead regional issues and also bilateral issues. While India is now looking westward, looking to improve its relationship with Western Asia, Asian country in the Arab Gulf region, and also extending to Africa, Egypt is looking eastward. For 2 years now, we have been seeing Egypt reaching out to Southeast Asian countries and also other Asian countries in hope to improve relationship and open new opportunities for itself. So these two worlds are now meeting each other and enabling these beautiful scenes that we are seeing today.
Mr. Srivastav, that is one point that Ziada made that I had wanted to speak about earlier also, that India is not dictating terms. So are we seeing a world now where there are no more alliances, where there is one leader and everybody else galvanizes around their viewpoint? It is either their view or it is the highway for the other countries. The change in geopolitical strategy now is that from alliances we are moving to alignments where common interests matter, nobody gets to dictate terms, and which is why the friendship is stronger perhaps?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Let's take up Egypt's case. Egypt has close political relations, strategic relations with USA. It is also cooperating with Russia in the domain of nuclear power. Russia is going to build a nuclear power plant in Egypt. So most countries are following a multi-vector foreign policy, which is the best answer for their urge for autonomy. In case of India and Egypt, this has been the basic impulse behind their choice for non-aligned policies earlier. And even today, this remains the underlying thrust of their policies and of both the countries. Egypt and India can work together in Middle East, in Africa. As I was saying earlier, Egypt has this unique distinction of being part of the Middle East and also part of Africa. And both of us have played a major role in UN peacekeeping. That is an area we can work together. Egypt is playing a role in climate diplomacy, and that is again an interest that we share. So there are multiple points of convergence. This does not necessarily translate into an alliance. This is simply a convergence of interests. And of course, the relationship has something much stronger going for it, and that is the historical and the cultural relations.
Maroof, do you think that India is now moving up in the ladder of its global heft? Because it almost looks like we've become some sort of a linchpin now. You know, we saw earlier Papua New Guinea leaders saying that PM Modi is a voice of the global south. We did manage in the US to get African nations a permanent seat in the G20. Are we also becoming one of those countries around which others would want to rally instead of us being either the Russia bloc or the US bloc?
See, I have maintained for many years, and now what I'm saying is being proved true, that India is a juggernaut that cannot be stopped or contained. And the reason why Mr. Modi had such a successful visit to the United States was because America recognizes that it has a lot of opportunities in engaging with India on the terms that India spells out. For example, Americans have been obsessed with alliances. India has been obsessed with not being part of an alignment, as the distinguished diplomat just brought out. India is a country that likes a partnership of equals. And as I said on Times Now and Times Now Bharat, when Mr. Modi arrived in White House, that as an ally, he would not have got the treatment that he has received with the state guest respect that he got in Washington. He's got it because America sees India as a strategic partner of consequence. And as your distinguished lady guest brought out, see, India is the bridge between the prosperous West and the global South. And the leadership of the G20 has provided us the opportunity to do that. India is also a country that carries great respect in Moscow, which is now being marginalized by the West. But Egypt is also engaging with Moscow. And so, therefore, here is an idea that I've been promoting for the last couple of days, that India can actually make a global contribution to a current crisis, and that become the mediator and peace seeker in the conflict in Ukraine, because the US respects India's opinion and knows that it doesn't have an ulterior agenda. The Russians respect India's opinion, and Russia is trading extensively with India. And as far as China is concerned, China is viewed with suspicion by the entire West. And as far as India is concerned, there is something, this was an idea that was suggested, I think a year ago by the French, that India could be the peacemaker there. Now, there are many in India who are allergic to the idea of India mediating, thinking then the world will get into the Kashmir issue and try and interfere with us. But I think we hold our own. No power in the world can take away Kashmir from India. I make this statement with a great sense of responsibility. And the second thing is that India is now got a lot to offer for everybody. America sees India as a great economic opportunity for building various critical technologies, for doing trade with India in the area of artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and things of that nature. The aircraft deal you've been reading about, the GE F414, is a path-breaking deal. And eventually, I think Egypt could also be a beneficiary of that, because Egypt had already approached India for the LCA aircraft, and that's where the F414 GE engine will be fitted. And also the fact that India is amongst the 6 countries that has a sort of presence in space. India is a country that is also being seen as a hub for alternate energy and peaceful energy, solar energy, all those things put together. So the world is moving on beyond petty rivalries of Cold War. Those that are bogged down in it will be footnotes in history. What we need to look at is how India can put its entire strength into place to be a kind of source of goodwill and achievement to the world. And that's where I see India's place. Yes, there will be criticism, but India has historically played a large role. And I had argued when they were shifting the flame from India Gate to the new war memorial, that every Indian soldier who fought and died for an Indian regiment even before independence was an Indian. He did not know when India would be independent, but he put his neck and life on the line. And what you see are the graves in this war memorial of Indian soldiers, close to 4,000, actually 3,799, who put their neck on the line for the defense of Egypt in the port of Suez. And Mr. Modi is signing the document there. This led to the famous last cavalry charge there, the Haifa charge, which the 61st Cavalry carried out. A memento and a memorial to that is the Teen Murti Memorial in Delhi. So we are a country, as General George Patton said, you're a country not where your borders are. You're a country as far as your last soldier died and put his life on the line. Back to you.
Right, and there you see Prime Minister paying tribute to one of those soldiers, to almost 4,000 of those soldiers who put their lives on the line. The visuals that you see on screens right now coming from Heliopolis Memorial in Cairo. This is a memorial that is dedicated to Indian soldiers, around 4,000 Indian soldiers who died fighting in various campaigns in Egypt and Palestine. This was around the First World War, where they had laid down their lives. This cemetery also commemorates 1,700 Commonwealth soldiers who had died in the Second World War. But the point that Maroof was making is that India is now holding on its own. But, a lot of credit to that also, Mr. Srivastav, goes to the economic might of a country, the way other nations speak to you, the way other nations interact with you. why you get to be an equal partner on the table is because you worked on your economic might. And once India says that in about 5 years from now or 4 years from now we are going to be the third largest economy, there is little that anybody in the world can do to ignore the importance, especially when India is not just a taker. We also have a lot of things to give to other countries.
Yes, but before I move to economics, since the visuals are there of the war symmetry, let me just add from my reminiscences of Egypt. It's not simply the Heliopolis war symmetry. There are war symmetries dotted all over Egypt. In Al-Alamein, in Marsa Matruh, I have visited almost all of them. And it is such a moving experience. You know, the poor fellows, probably they are getting 20 rupees or less, and they've laid down their lives for a foreign power in a foreign land. And the tombstone simply reads a Hindu soldier of Indian Army or a Muslim soldier of Indian Army lies here. So I think it's a tremendous gesture Prime Minister has made in visiting the cemetery to honor the Indians who had fallen for the cause of peace. Coming back to your point about the economic clout that heft that the country has, yes, I remember when I went as a young third secretary, I think our trade did not go beyond $200 million. And today it's about $7 billion, and that's hardly, that does not really represent the potential. And in this trade, Egypt has a surplus. And that tells you India's importance, that India offers a big market for Egypt's petrochemical exports. Egypt has a lot of gas. Now, given the distance, gas cannot be brought here, though Egypt is also building an LNG plant. But that LNG plant is for export of gas from Egypt to Europe. It's in the Mediterranean. But yes, the gas, the products of that gas, that is the fertilizer and petrochemicals, that can be brought here. And that is, there's something which has a mutual interest. The other thing, and I'm talking in terms of mutual interest, I'm not saying that one is more important than the other, that this offer of a dedicated hub to India in Egypt, that will be an excellent idea, because Egypt being an African country as well, and Africa having chosen a common, has become a common free trade area, any industry set up in Egypt will also give its products access to wider African market. And of course, Egypt has a much stronger relationship with the Middle East countries. And from Egyptian point of view, as I mentioned earlier, India is a growing economy, and that has its own tail.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, and Ziada, for joining us for this very in-depth analysis of what lies for India as well as Egypt in these interactions. Time for us to take a very quick break, but we'll keep getting you all the developments from Egypt on this visit.